Hey everyone, and welcome to Masters of Innovation. This is episode 3, where we'll be talking about spatial experiences and spatial locations. What does a place mean to you? And to help me kind of demystify spaces and places, I've got Richard Benson. So Richard, thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh no, thanks for having me, Alex. It's lovely to be here.
Well, we've known each other for quite a while, obviously from your Accenture days and all the way through to now. I mean, maybe you could tell us a bit about maybe your kind of personal and professional journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Richard Benson. I've been in design all of my career, so about 30 odd years. I started out actually in industrial design, so product design, physical product design. Very quickly found myself into interior architecture and worked a lot around brand identity, interior architecture, and worked with various agencies in those areas looking at retail design, corporate design. But always had a real passion for technology and how we use it. So I ended up an MD at Accenture. I was there for 7 years, looking specifically at how we use spatial design within an experience concept.
And this was a specific part of Accenture, right?
It was, yeah, in Accenture Song. So that's where all of the kind of creative agencies sit within Accenture. But during that sort of 7 years, obviously the world changed a lot. You know, I was there around about 2016 onwards. But we looked at how we were using that spatial design within, digital experiences. I did a lot of work in the Metaverse, looking at using our skills.
Yeah.
And then just last year, I actually decided to set up my own startup again. So I've gone back to a smaller creative agency called Ape Designs. And that's really specifically looking at how we use physical space and digital experiences and bring them together. So we are working on, physical stores and spaces, but we're also looking at kind of the metaverse and how we use
the digital and physical kind of
there's a term we'll use. I don't know how I feel about it. Phygital,
yeah.
But it's
the new buzzword, I think, actually. For
it's stuck around a while, but that combination of physical and digital, people kind of get it.
No, it's super cool. And I mean, space, I think, and spatial, design is probably going to be the focus of our conversation. So, I mean, if we break it down to the most basic concept. I mean, like, what is space to you? I mean, we're sat in the Hollow Lounge, which has its own vibe. We showed you other different parts. Which is, what is space to you? And is there like a certain space that resonates with you? Or?
I mean, you'll get 100 different definitions depending on which part of the industry you talk to or people in life generally. But I always say space is emotions. I mean, it's how we interface with the world. It's how our memories are formed. We connect on a very different level individually to physical spaces that we interact with. So, that can be your home, your workplace, galleries, places we go to. They all kind of trigger a deep association. And I always kind of say to people, what's the most memorable space you've ever been to? Because we all have one. I mean, if I asked you, Alex, what?
My most memorable
and it could be anything from the day you were born till today.
So I think from a personal perspective, I think of my grandfather or grandparents' house in Dublin. There was a different smell there.
Say,
and
what
a different
do you remember?
It was just. I think it was just like the memories from being there.
Yeah.
I think it was always I'm half Irish, and I would go there. And it would be like a connection with family that you didn't see throughout the year, and it was always like a defined thing. And then the other space would probably be when I worked at McLaren, right?
Yes.
The McLaren Technology Centre, obviously Norman Foster and Partners, state-of-the-art facility. But working there was like, it was kind of a bit bizarre. Like some days I would be feeling like down, like just like not feeling it today.
Yeah.
And my department was in the basement.
Yeah.
So sometimes it was, no windows and you're kind of stuck in there. But I would just go up the lift, walk down the boulevard and walk past Ayrton Senna's Formula One car, and I would just get energy from it.
Transcended.
And and then I would go back downstairs and I'd be like, do you know what?
Yeah.
I know what the mission I'm on here, and I'd reconnected with the physical environment.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think they're two examples from myself personally that a physical place giving me energy. Right. Yeah.
It completely, and I'm not a neurologist by any means. I'm not, not into the the powers of the brain and how we understand it, but there is reasons that the way we interact, the way it makes us feel, and actually, you know, there's parts of our brain that really just meta tag things using space. So if we go to a place, it's multisensory. Obviously, you're not just seeing something, you're smelling it, you're hearing it, you're touching it, you're taking all the senses, and they become very deep-rooted memories. So as I said, they become very emotional. And the hippocampus part of the brain, which is deep in the temporal lobe, is actually where
pretty technical.
But it's I found this fascinating because I always like the science behind it. Like I say, I'm not an expert, but that is literally like your brain meta tagging things.
Right.
It controls memory, learning, and emotions.
Right.
And there's part of the brain that actually connects to spaces. So a weird fact. I love weird facts. Now, they've proven that, you know, people that were the black cab drivers, taxi drivers, found that part of their hippocampus was larger because they were memorizing spaces to connect them together. So, you know, again, at the end of the day, how we create memories in life day to day, it can be interactions with people, but space plays a large part of it. And I think that's what always moved me, whether it's corporate, domestic, you know, the space that wraps around us is really powerful.
I think it makes a big impact. And I think people don't sometimes understand that the space that they spend a lot of their time in actually has a material impact on their mood, their feeling, even their their drive or motivation. You know, like I'm blessed by working in a very high-end office, and that gives me energy when I'm here. You know, I enjoy working at home, but when I'm at home for too long, I get disconnected, and I think that's a really key thing. Right?
And then this is key to the kind of interior and architecture of buildings that we inhabit. I always say that buildings aren't just built to be buildings; they're built to bring people together. And too much time, you know, it's wonderful to have space, home space, to be alone. But the coming together, the communal aspect of it, you know, the human aspect of spaces are really, really powerful.
I think this is getting into where we are today.
Exactly.
Because, where are we in 2024 when it comes to spaces, right? Because I think we have a very disconnected connection. You know, since COVID, things have changed considerably, right?
Completely. I mean, you know, we got to think for that one moment we all know, the entire world experienced isolation. You know, where you were at that time, largely you were trapped in
where you locked down was where you locked down, right?
And that did some amazing things as well as negative things. I mean, we were all reconnected with our personal space. We've certainly found a balance between work and home because we were in home, but maybe balanced one way. But it shifted our relationship with space. Like I say, that, you know, in terms of a lot of areas, you know, we weren't interfacing with stores in the same way. We were doing it digitally. The office were closed. And then I think what happened is we slowly came out of that. We've now reconnecting with space in a different way. Things have changed. The way we obtain products and services largely digital. It's convenient. You know, a lot of people have realized that. But then again, there's this kind of special moment about now coming together to shop or to experience something. And I say this is really when we're getting into the kind of physical experiences that are becoming really, really powerful again for people.
I think that's it. And I think that as a moment in time has completely shifted things, right? Like, so mostly being at home, and that changed people's decisions, right? They invested in their own home because I'm going to spend a lot of time here. I'm going to invest to make this as enjoyable as I can. One of the other positives, although, you know, like you said, more negatives than positives from that whole experience, was people connecting with nature as well.
Yeah, completely.
I think that was a big positive.
It was amazing. I mean, I think we all knew we had green spaces, and, you know, living in the city, you know, I live in London, you know, the common spaces and the parks are really important. But, you know, they became our only dose of biophilic design, as I call it, getting outside in nature. So I think post-pandemic, you know, post that experience, it's left an imprint on people.
Definitely.
So the spaces we have, you know, even be in the workspace, you know, they're much more home-like. You know, they're decored like a place I want to be in. They're more variety as well. They're not all the same. Because again, we kind of crave for different spaces rather than it all being generic. And then greenery, you know, bringing that into, you know, the open spaces are becoming incredibly important again to people. That love of nature is being tucked back into the interiors and the spaces we're designing. All of these things existed before, but I think that was just I
think it's people's appreciation for it and acknowledgement of the importance of it, I think, has gone up. I think that's the key, right? I think before maybe people thought, you know, they could get away with a certain different design. And I think that now they're realizing that it's making a material impact.
And it's been more consolidated. I think, you know, there are less, you know, you only look at your high streets, there's less stores. We don't, you know, I think, but what we're seeing is a resurgence of the experiences that we're creating being more special. And I think that's the key thing that, lazy design in any field could mean that you're not really treating the user as a special person. But I think with spatial design now, you'll see stores, you'll see hotels, you'll see civic spaces where really considering the user and really making it a special moment to justify it.
And I think that's the thing as well, is that these special places are becoming almost communal areas where people are congregating. So for example, I was in the Outernet only just last week. Amazing. We were doing some filming there. And it's an unbelievable space, perpetually busy. It's apparently London's most busy attraction now. I think there's 100 million people every year.
Trafalgar Square, but digital.
Yeah, but it's a fully digital kind of space and interaction. But that to me is an example of, a new space where people are actually using that as a community space to experience together.
But that whole area, I mean, we'll get into the outer now because it blew my mind when I first went there, particularly what it is, and we'll talk a little bit about it. But that whole area of London has completely been reinvented post-pandemic. Again, Oxford Street, it's at one end of Oxford Street at Tottenham Court Road. That area's got huge history. I mean, it was Denmark Street where all the bands from 60s onwards recorded. It had fallen into a bit of dislove. That end of town as well, at the end of Oxford Street, as for retail, was a bit tired.
Right.
But bringing that there has brought huge amount of people there, and it literally is an open air, an open air digital theatre, art exhibition.
Digital exhibition. Right?
But it's as a space, it's a lot of connected spaces. It's really a canvas for digital art, and people can walk in off the street. It's free. Yeah. They do a lot of launches for brands, and we'll talk about that as well. That's become a huge thing for Physics Space, but it is pretty amazing. And I think that kind of combination of a bit of retail, hospitality, entertainment, which is what we're talking about, is kind of where physical space is blending now.
And it's, like you alluded to, it's that wow factor. Yeah. There needs to be something interesting and exciting to draw people in. And so obviously, when we talk about stuff like that, the Sphere in Vegas is another example.
Again, it's scale.
Insane kind of exhibition. Right?
Yeah, unbelievable.
I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, I mean, I remember when they launched that, and I don't think people could believe it. I mean, obviously, it's in Las Vegas if you haven't seen it. And the Sphere is a perfect sphere, which is an art centre, effectively, launched by U2. I think they're doing their residency there. Yeah. But the exterior of it is completely digital, but the interior is too. So it completely.
I think that's what people don't realise, actually, is that they know that the exterior is. Yeah. But they don't realise the interior. Yeah.
No, I mean, and again, it's reinventing the way that we interact with the stars that we go to see, right? Because I remember listening to Bono talk about it in U2. When they were creating it, they brought artists in to create basically any canvas. But he said the most amazing moment was when they projected the desert and did a time lapse of Vegas being born.
Cool.
And the actual physical environment disappears. You just stood out in the desert.
Nice.
And I think that playing psychologically again with space and no space through content, I think is just amazing. So again, but I think the scale, both of those have scale. And I think as humans, when you go to any great architecture from time began, the sense of scale is awe-inspiring. There's always the cathedrals, it could be the shopping centres now that you go into, but these kind of spaces, they just, the scale of them, can really have an impact upon you.
100%. And I think, then it starts transcending that kind of real world and digital world, which you mentioned. I mean, like, the Sphere or the Outernet, it's mostly, LED content, screen, right? Playing content. Yeah. But you can interact with it. So, for example, there's an exhibition at the moment at the Outernet, the Butterfly Trail, and there's a QR code. You see the QR code, and what's interesting, they see the QR code, and I see like kids getting their phones out and scanning it. They know what to do immediately, and then it launches an augmented reality experience. Yeah. And then you're interacting with stuff not just on the flat screen that is around you, but actually through your kind of physical space and your device. Like,
I think that's. I mean, again, whether we use the term metaverse or spatial computing now, whatever the term is today, at the end of the day, I think the way we interface with technology, the way we interface with digital content, like you said, the spaces we talked about, the internet, it's a fairly simple space, but the content can transcend it anywhere, the digital content.
Yeah, if you turn the screens off, there's not that much that you're thinking, wow, but when the content is on, it blows your mind.
Completely. Yeah. And I think, but at the end of the day, and again, not just from the pandemic, it's been escalation, we're interfacing with a lot of information in a very 2D way in a screen. And I think, actually what AR is doing now in mixed reality is allowing us to use that device, but to see that data, that what we're interfacing with in our real world environment. And so, you're right. I mean, kids just adapt to it very, very quickly, as everybody does. But I think seeing it more as a portal into the content and a more three-dimensional interaction, bringing physical, so it's interacting with the real spaces that we're in, is really what's exciting about it.
I think you touched on that the 3D element being key, right? What is it about 3D and spaces that really kind of light up, right? Because obviously I think this transition from 2D to 3D it's part of the journey that we're on.
Absolutely.
This kind of digital
always,
world.
I mean, it'll always work. I mean, I just think, a lot of, certainly digital interfaces have always been very two-dimensional. We scroll through things, we're on a very linear journey, but it's not the way that we interact with the world. If you walked into a 2D world, it would be completely puzzling for you. Alien.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that, we have a sense of space, things are small, things are large, but they all have form. And I think now the means of kind of interacting with content in that way, so using three-dimensional visualization, bringing that out of the device, through various devices that we can wear or through our own mobile device, it's just we're exploring things in a more of a journey. And to go back to the hippocampus again, what's interesting is it's episodic. So I always say great experiences, whether they're digital or physical, are a narrative. They're like a story. We're telling a story, but there's a sequence to it. And I think with 3 dimensions, you very quickly follow that sequence. It's episodic, the way you interact with things. And I think that's the way we interact with the real world. It's very natural.
100%. And I think that, when you start adding 3D elements to different interactions, it completely changes the game. And I think especially through the pandemic, we had this acceleration.
Yes.
Because, we needed to interact and communicate. And, there was that fatigue of 2D flat screen to screen contact. So it's like, how do we connect and interact? And so brands really kind of jumped in and explored, what does this mean for us?
Yes.
And I'm interested to get your thoughts on, obviously you've worked in interior design for physical locations as well as digital. I mean, what's the difference? What are the things you need to think about?
It's what's important with any interface, any experience is it's familiar. So building upon real world experiences that we we see and know. So we know a door, we enter that portal, we walk through into another space. Creating familiar environments is a great way to build these experiences. But it also, if you look at where it all came from, which is effectively gaming, and the fact that we're building these huge engines to real-time render massive worlds, the fact is that you can transport anywhere. And so as a spatial design, it's really interesting. We're using kind of that sense of space and some of those familiarities to build environments digitally, but then we're not confined by physics. We can do anything.
But this is the thing, we aren't
in that world.
But in terms of some of the design that we've both seen separately, and we've talked about this, is that sometimes decisions are made that don't really make sense in a digital world. It's like, well, you're making that decision based on constraints the real world would impose on you, but in this digital world, you're not constrained by that. Yeah.
Again, it's about taking someone on that journey.
Right.
It's familiarity will get you to a point, but then you've really got to break away from that. I mean, I think if you look at talk about art, a lot of the kind of the Van Gogh exhibition that we've had in London, all these immersive experiences, they use scale, but they use form as well. And you're walking on more of a linear journey through these physical spaces and being presented with it. I think it's just fascinating that we can create anything. I get a little bit fatigued when I see some of these metaverse experiences or XR experiences, and they are just a copy of what we have in the real world. And I kind of think, well, come on, we need some familiarity, but let's just push the boundaries.
Even just simple things like being able to fly around.
Right.
Yeah. And the thing is, for us, I think this is the disconnect. It's the new generation versus the existing generation, right? So people that are used to the physical world and have grown up in that have a different set of instincts to someone that's a Gen Z. He's grown up using Fortnite, flying around. Like for example, that example on the internet, they saw the QR code, they opened their phone and they immediately scanned it and started playing with augmented reality. But maybe another person wouldn't do that. So I mean, what's this difference between I
think it's just what you're used to, what you've grown up with. There's a lot of unlearning happens with age. Actually, if I'd be really honest, effectively, they're just so familiar, they've grown up with it. I mean, just the way I interface with technology, I'm having to learn to untype. Right. I mean, we've all been using voice control with Alexa and various devices in our home, but now it's going to be the way that we interface with things. And I think,
all of those those new devices, right? Like that humane pin and all these like AI hardware pieces. The whole thing about this generative AI stuff is it's multimodal, right? You can use your voice, you can use text, you can upload images. It's all supposed to be, no matter what the input, you can get a required output. And so I think that's the thing as well, is that like, it's actually faster sometimes to just talk.
Yes,
rather than type. And I think, you're having to unlearn that now, right?
It totally is. And I think it's just, again, we'll all adapt to it, but certain generations like Gen Z are built in the way that they've grown up with certain technologies. But I think effectively, I love technology. It's becoming more and more invisible. As we talked about AI, we talk about the devices that are becoming smaller for XR or Metaverse. It literally, they won't be there. But then what we're left with is in the physical environment that we're in. It's all spatial, and I get really excited about it. I think it's no technology is the end of anything; it's the start of something else. We've all got to adapt to it.
100%. I think we talk about this kind of spatial experiences. There's a big opportunity, right, as well for brands to really kind of differentiate. Like one of the experiences I tried, I can't remember when it was, but it was maybe a year ago or something like that, with the Fatboy Slim VR show, right? So it was effectively a digital concert, all in virtual reality, which was super awesome. But like there's opportunity to just provide experiences that people have never even experienced before.
Absolutely. Right? I think that's it. I think we're if we can imagine it, we can build it. And I think again, I go back to the fact that it's not one thing versus the other. It's a combination. There's physical and digital coming together will create amazing experiences, but they've got to be memorable. And I think that's the key thing for me. I love working, in true bricks and mortar because we're building something, but I equally like doing that digitally. But at the end of the day, there's some principles that I think we leverage of both. So I think the key thing for us is that we use this term in a lot of our work with clients is about this kind of idea of nexus.
Right.
So it's an intersection point. It's bringing people, events, and spaces together. And I think if you look specifically, you mentioned brand. I think we spend a lot of time when we're creating experiences trying to differentiate one brand from another. Brand is like a person,
100%,
a personality. But ultimately, we're trying to create either physical or digital spatial experiences that are memorable, that are emotional, as we talked at the beginning about, how it triggers memories, you connect with it. But creating experiences that you really consider the user, the whole journey, all the way through. And then ultimately, particularly, I think there's a lot of talk about space fighting back, about how we're going to see it on the high street a lot more, particularly how we interact with brands. Being flexible, we have brand launches now. These are pop-ups. We have. I think there's a resurgence in the flagship experience. So traditionally attached to fashion retailers, the big high-end fashion brands. But I think as there's less retail outlets, they're combining.
They become exclusive, and I think the competition for top-end real estate in cities like London is only going to get more
completely
fierce.
We're seeing that blend again post-pandemic of kind of residential and these retail outlets, commercial spaces, but they are becoming like each, you're having to fight for the right to actually create a journey to that location. So hospitality, I think again we're seeing after the pandemic, hospitality is incredibly important. Food and beverage, the F&B industry, people are going out and spending more money. They want to combine it all together, whether that's in a mall or an out-of-town destination that has food, entertainment, it has retail, but all kind of tailored around the individual. And I think it's really fascinating. It puts the power back, as we did to the employee, with their time in the office, to the shopper. And brands have to fight a little bit harder and create experience that justify, the visit.
100%. And it's super exciting time. I mean, last thing I probably wanted to touch on, which is, I guess a little bit left field, but we were talking about emotion. Right, around spaces. I mentioned like my grandparents' house, McLaren Technology Centre. What about metaverse spaces and like our connection to those? Because traditionally you would say, well, what's your connection to a 3D space that's digital, right? But I think that actually that's not true. And people also attach things to memories. You're talking about this hippocampus thing, right? So I think if you experience something that's really profound in a fully digital space, that will resonate. It stays with you. It stays with you.
Yeah, completely.
In the same way it would in a physical space.
I mean, we've all seen it, better than I, like with the HoloLens work, like learning, the ability to learn new skills when you're recreating experiences effectively, these worlds it creates is amazing. You retain information, you learn faster. And you can put yourself in situations you couldn't be without, hurting yourself in the real simulations, things in the real world. But I think brands are realizing the way we shop, again, being very 2D.
Yeah.
It's, the interface is not really, we're losing all the excitement of being in a physical location and browsing and the way so e-commerce, I think, is catching up a lot. And so creating brand experiences. So it's interesting when you talk about a brand, like we said, they're unique. What it stands for, the Metaverse gives you an opportunity to go and visit a location with like-minded people, because I say it's all about community, to explore what the brand is providing, both culturally and through its products and services, and create an experience that you want to return to. And again, with AR, that means that you're not necessarily doing it in a headset. You're doing it in the world that you're in. You're bringing those products to you. So I think it's really exciting, and I think it's an exciting space for brands to rethink about how they project their purpose and their values to people, and actually provide their products and services.
And the thing is, the brands need to be where the eyes are.
Yeah.
Right. So that to build connection with individuals, because that's really what brand association really is. It's about the individual feeling a connection to a brand. You need to be where the individuals are, and the reality is that as the generations go through and we get to Gen Z and Gen Alpha and all that, like, we're getting to a point where they're living a lot of their life digitally.
Yeah, they are.
So you need to be there.
You do. And look, someone that's worked in digital design for a while as well, I think it weighs heavy on our shoulders, the amount of time that a lot of people are spending in this. So again, if we can combine a physical and a digital experience and break them out of that, because it can be quite insular. And I think, as individuals, humans, we want to interact with people like this. And it's sometimes, technology creates a barrier.
That's why I was always drawn to HoloLens. The reality is, that's why I was always been drawn to that, because it's blending the real world and the digital world. When I have a device like that on, I can still see you, I can still see the real world, but we're experiencing something together as a joint experience. To me, that's the real power. And to be honest, that's where I see the future, right? I think a future where we're all on VR devices and in our own homes, and we're not really talking to anyone, is very dystopian. And I think that there is like a negative connotation to that whole term of metaverse or spatial computing for that reason. But I think the reality is that if we use this as a tool to enhance our physical connection, it's only going to support us, right?
Totally agree. And I think, and that's why I say all these interfaces, gesture, everything. It just becomes invisible. We're having a conversation and we may have a third person, an AI with us that's actually helping that, providing information, things we need to interface with. And I think it's,
So as we kind of wrap things up today, I guess obviously the usual question that I ask most of my guests is, what's next and things to think about when it comes to spatial and spatial design. I mean, for you, what do you think is next?
Well, I'm really enjoying right now having conversations with old clients and new clients about what the future of retail is specifically. Because again, like I said, we've all found the digital channel of choice. It's convenient, it's easy. But people are starting to question, the in-person experience. So for me, we've been talking about something called store nexus. Nexus meaning kind of the bringing together, the intersection of people, spaces, and objects. And really starting to re-examine, go back to basics about what is it about physical experiences that we can leverage, what's important. And so we've drilled it down into a few points, and as we've been talking a lot about today, the brand is really important. How do you create brand beacons, places that people want to come together, whether that's a hospitality brand or a luxury brand or a service brand, but also really examining about how you can make it much more emotional. So really be entertaining. And at the end of the day, it's not just about a commodity I'm buying. We're fighting for the attention.
We're seeing a lot of these like flagship stores coming back, right?
Completely. And I think, again, flagship was a strange word. If it was a big store in the past, it was a flagship. But effectively now, as we see less and less, volume of stores, we're starting to consider all of them as being flagships. But the next thing is really that. It's about flexibility and the fact that, no one size fits all. Really a pop-up that transports around different locations is a store, all the way up to a flagship, which is a more brand beacon location. So that's really important, I think, looking at the flexibility angle of it, but also the community thing. And we talk a lot, and I've actually gone all the way through this talk and not mentioned an Apple store once, but come on, let's give them the credit. I mean, Apple stores are amazing spaces because they're about community. So the importance of, creating spaces for local communities.
It's not just a space where you transact.
No.
I think that's the key, right?
Yeah.
And Apple are amazing at that. There's spaces in terms of like, you're learning, they do classes in their stores and stuff like that.
If you listen to them talk their retail department, they talk about them being civic spaces.
Yeah.
They're actually giving something back.
Yeah.
But ultimately it's about coming around that brand, right? Everyone that works there is infectious in their love for the brand. It's an experience, but it's a community at the heart of it, learning about, how to do amazing things with their product. So I think that's really important. So the idea of community has been a real imprint for the next store Nexus.
Yeah, and I was going to say on that as well, like just in terms of the examples. I mean, there's Apple, which obviously do it from a technology perspective, but it's not just specifically those industries. No. I mean, like Diageo with Johnny Walker, right? In Edinburgh, they have their flagship Johnny Walker stand. It's not really about going in and buying a bottle of Johnny Walker. No. It's about going and tasting, it's getting a connection to the brand,
exactly.
It's experiencing
something.
It's entertainment.
Completely. And I think, an area that I'm always fascinated when you get areas of the market that haven't really moved. I think automotive is a huge thing. You look at Tesla and what they did, like they completely rethought how you sell automotives. But then you look at what Lexus did even before the pandemic. They created a restaurant. It wasn't about selling cars. It was about belonging to the brand and finding like-minded people. Again, that sense of community. But making an entertainment mode. You go out for drinks, for dinner, you experience the brand, talks. If they're going to launch a product, that's where they're going to do it from. So I think multi-use, multinodal use of space is really important, and I mean, it's amazing, even in banking, an area that I've spent a lot of time looking at physical spaces for banks, branches and likes. We've seen actually, as they've removed a lot of the branches, that they've even been coming together, so sharing spaces. Right. So the post office launched locations where, there weren't branches nearby, where one day of the week it's a certain a brand, and the next week it's another. So you're able to give service to community. So I think collaboration between brands as well, rather than just competition. So for me, it's really exciting, and I'm just really looking forward to looking and talking to clients about how we can.
And I guess that's onto Ape, obviously your new venture. I guess that's a lot of what you'll be doing, right? So you're working a lot with retail clients as well as financial services and things like that.
Yeah, so I think we're going to stay core to what we do well and what we've been around about buildings, physical spaces that are connected to brand, and I said re-examining what that can mean. But I'm also really excited about working with brands to see about how they deliver digital experiences that use spatial computing and Metaverse. There's areas to really create, spatial experiences digitally that will live up to their brand. So, just looking forward to, creating.
It's exciting. It's exciting. And I guess, to get in contact with you, email, you've obviously got a website as well.
Usual channels. You can connect me through LinkedIn, but we have a website which we can post up the details. Just contact me there, and look forward to having a chat with some.
Awesome. Richard, thanks so much.
No, it's been great, mate. Thanks, Alex.
See you soon.
Cheers.